The phone buzzed in my hand at 11:47 p.m., and I already knew. I just didn't want to know yet. "Daddy, when are you coming to Tyler's birthday?" He keeps asking. A little boy's voice. A voicemail meant for someone else's phone, on a number I'd never seen, hidden inside a locked case taped behind the dryer in our garage. I sat on the cold concrete floor of that garage in Millbrook, Ohio, and I listened to it 4 times. Tyler, 5 years old, asking for Daddy. My husband, Daniel Reyes, was upstairs asleep next to a body pillow because his back was acting up, while 90 minutes away in a town called Springfield, a woman named Vanessa Cole was raising his son and telling that little boy that his father just worked a lot. I want to tell you something before I tell you the rest of this story. I was adopted when I was 6 years old. My whole life, one fear sat quietly under everything I did, the fear that I would never be real family to anyone, that someday someone would look at me and say, "You don't actually belong here." I built a marriage, a home, 2 children, and 12 years of my life trying to prove that fear wrong. And in one voicemail, sitting on a garage floor at midnight, I learned that the man I built it all with had built an entire second life to escape from me. This is the story of how I found the truth, how his family tried to convince me I was imagining things, and how I made sure that when the truth finally came out, it came out with paperwork nobody could argue with. My name is Claire Bennett Reyes. I'm 36 years old, and for the first 6 years of my life, I didn't have a last name that meant anything permanent. I was born to a mother who couldn't keep me. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's the truth, and this story only makes sense if you understand where I started. I bounced between 2 foster placements before the Bennetts. Carol and Frank Bennett, a school teacher and a mechanic from Dayton, took me in when I was 5 and adopted me legally the following year, on March 14, 1996. I remember the courtroom. I remember the judge asking me if I wanted the Bennett name, and I remember nodding so hard my whole body shook. Carol and Frank were good to me. I want to say that clearly, because this isn't a story about cruel adoptive parents. It's a story about a wound that never fully closed, even in a loving home, the quiet, persistent question that lived in the back of my mind, at every holiday, every family photo, every time a relative said, "You kids," instead of "our kids. Am I really family, or am I just someone they're being kind to? That question followed me into adulthood. It followed me into my marriage. I met Daniel Reyes in 2012 at a logistics conference in Columbus. He was funny, ambitious, the kind of man who remembered the name of the barista 3 visits in a row. He ran a growing trucking and freight brokerage business, Reyes Transit Solutions, and within 2 years he'd built it from 4 trucks to 19. We married in October 2014 in a small ceremony at his mother's church. His mother, Patricia Reyes, walked me down half the aisle herself, since my own father, Frank, had passed the year before. For a long time I thought I had finally found the thing I'd been chasing my whole life, a family that was mine, not because paperwork said so, but because I'd built it with my own hands. We had our daughter Mia in 2016, and our son Jake in 2019. Daniel's business kept growing. By 2022, Reyes Transit Solutions had contracts stretching from Ohio into Kentucky and Indiana, and Daniel started covering more territory, as he put it, overnight trips to Springfield, Ohio, about 90 minutes southwest of us, where he said he was meeting with a fuel distribution partner. At first, it made sense. Then it made a little too much sense. He started going to Springfield every other Thursday, staying overnight, coming home Friday smelling like a different laundry detergent than ours. When I asked, he laughed it off. "Babe, it's a hotel. They all smell like hotel." There were small things, a receipt from a toy store in Springfield that he said was for a client's kid, a missed call from a number saved only as Fuel Depot, Yop Mike, that when I once accidentally dialed back, went to a woman's voicemail before I hung up in confusion and told myself I'd misdialed. Here's the part that matters most for this story, though, the part that ties back to who I am. At Thanksgiving in 2023, Daniel's sister Rachel was helping me set the table, and Patricia, Daniel's mother, was going through old photo albums with Mia. Mia pointed at a picture of baby Daniel and asked, "Grandma, was Mom a baby in this album too?" Patricia laughed and said, without thinking, "Oh no, sweetheart, your mom joined the family later. This album is just our real family from the beginning." Our real family. I stood there holding a stack of napkins, feeling 6 years old again, sitting in a courtroom, wondering if the last name I'd been given was ever really mine to keep. Rachel caught my face and quickly said, "Mom, that's not what you meant." And Patricia waved a hand and said, "Of course not, Claire. Don't be sensitive, you know what I mean." I let it go. I told myself I was overreacting, that words don't always carry the weight we give them. I told myself that for 2 more years, right up until the night I found a phone hidden behind the dryer. The warning signs didn't arrive all at once. They arrived in the small, deniable moments that make you feel crazy for noticing them. In June 2024, we took a family trip to my sister-in-law Rachel's lake house for the 4th of July. Daniel's whole family was there, his mother Patricia, his brother Eric, Eric's wife Dana, and their 3 biological kids. At one point, Patricia was arranging everyone for a family photo, and she said, loudly, cheerfully, "Okay, Reyes, bloodline in the front. Everybody else can fill in behind." I stood there. Mia and Jake stood there. My children, Daniel's biological children with me, suddenly felt like extras in someone else's portrait, because their mother wasn't born into this family. I said something. I said, "Patricia, that's a strange way to phrase it." She turned to me, genuinely surprised, and said, "Oh, Claire, don't make this into something. It's just a joke about who's tallest." Eric's wife Dana chimed in, "Yeah, we're not saying anything by it. You're overthinking this." That phrase, "you're overthinking this," became the soundtrack of the next 8 months of my life. When I brought up Daniel's overnight trips to Springfield increasing from twice a month to nearly every week, he said I was overthinking it. When I asked why his business phone had a passcode now, after 9 years of no passcode, he said I was overthinking it. When I found a duffel bag in his truck with clothes in a size that wasn't his, he said, "That's for a driver who left his stuff, Claire. Why are you going through my truck like I'm a criminal?" I started keeping a small notebook. Dates, times, small inconsistencies. I told myself I was building a case not to accuse him, but to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. In September 2024, my daughter Mia, then 8 years old, came home from a family gathering at Patricia's house and asked me something that split my chest open. "Mommy, is it true you're not really Grandma's family? Aunt Dana said you married into it." I remember kneeling down in our kitchen, holding her small hands and saying, "Sweetheart, family isn't only about blood. Mommy knows that better than anyone." But that night, after she went to sleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried, the way I hadn't cried since I was a little girl in foster care, wondering if I would ever stop being an outsider looking in. The next morning, I confronted Daniel about it. I said, "Your family keeps making comments that make me and the kids feel like second-class Reyeses. I need you to say something to them." He sighed, rubbed his temples and said, "Claire, you know how my mom is. She doesn't mean it like that. Can we not do this right now? I've got Springfield again Thursday." "Springfield again?" I asked him calmly. "Daniel, what exactly is in Springfield that needs you there every single week?" He looked at me, and for just a second, less than a second, something crossed his face that I would only understand months later. Fear, not annoyance. Fear. "It's a growing account, babe," he said. "I can't just hand it off." I believed him, because believing him was easier than believing the alternative. I believed him because somewhere inside me, the 6-year-old girl who'd finally found a name to keep was terrified of what would happen if I pulled on that thread and the whole sweater unraveled. I had no idea how right that fear would turn out to be. It was a Tuesday in February 2025 when everything cracked open. Our garage was flooding slightly from a broken gutter, and I was moving boxes off the floor when I found it. A small gray lockbox, taped to the back of the dryer with heavy-duty tape, clearly placed there to be invisible unless someone was looking exactly where I was looking. Inside, a phone. Older model, a prepaid line. Charged. Unlocked, because whoever hid it never expected anyone to find it in the first place. I sat down right there on the garage floor. Messages going back 3 years. Photos. A woman named Vanessa Cole, 31 years old, living in Springfield, Ohio. A little boy named Tyler, born June 2020. Text Reem, which meant Daniel had been with her while I was pregnant with our son Jake. Texts like, "Can't wait to see you and Ty this weekend. Tell him Daddy's bringing the fire truck he wanted." A voicemail, the one I told you about. Tyler's small voice asking when Daddy was coming to his birthday. Bank transfers, small, careful amounts, $600 here, $850 there, sent over 18 months from an account I didn't recognize, totaling just under $14,000, all routed to Vanessa Cole. I want to be honest with you. In that moment, on that garage floor, I did not think about Daniel first. I thought about myself at 6 years old in a courtroom, and I thought, of course even this, a marriage, a home, 2 children, was somehow not enough to be truly, fully mine. Of course there was another family somewhere that felt more real to him than the one he built with me. I confronted him that night. I didn't scream. I laid the phone on the kitchen table between us like a verdict. He went white. "Claire, I can explain. Explain the son," I said. "Explain the money. Explain why my daughter thinks she's not real Reyes family, while you're funding a fire truck for a 5-year-old 90 minutes away." He didn't deny it. That was almost worse than if he'd tried. "It happened before things got serious with her," he said. "I was going to end it. I got scared, Claire. Vanessa doesn't even know I'm married." That detail stopped me cold. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd deceived a woman raising his child into believing she was his only family, too. I called Daniel's mother the next morning, hoping, foolishly hoping for some support. Patricia's response still rings in my ears. "Claire, I'm sure it's not as bad as you think. Daniel wouldn't do that. Have you considered maybe you pushed him toward this by being so insecure all the time? You've always struggled with feeling like you belong. Maybe that's part of the problem here." I sat there, stunned, as my mother-in-law weaponized the very wound my adoption had left in me, turning her son's affair into evidence of my inadequacy. That was the moment something in me went quiet and cold and very, very clear. I stopped crying and started documenting. I am not a lawyer, but I had spent 12 years managing the books for Daniel's own business, Reyes Transit Solutions, part-time, unofficially, since 2015. I knew our finances better than he did, and I knew exactly where to look. Over the next 9 days, while maintaining a completely normal routine, so Daniel wouldn't suspect anything, I built a file. I found that the $14,000 sent to Vanessa had come from a business account, not our personal one, which meant Daniel had used company funds I had partial legal claim to as a co-signer and unofficial co-manager of the business since our marriage, to support a second household. I found a Springfield apartment lease, signed by Daniel Reyes in November 2019, 7 months before Tyler was even born, listing his employer as Reyes Transit Solutions. I photographed everything. I made 3 separate backups, one on a cloud drive, one on a USB drive I gave to my sister-in-law Rachel, and one printed and locked in a safe deposit box at my own bank, under my maiden name, Bennett. Rachel, to my surprise, became my greatest ally. When I showed her the lease and the texts, she went pale and said, "Claire, I need to tell you something." Mom knew. Not everything, but she knew there was a woman in Springfield. She told me 2 years ago, and made me swear not to say anything because she didn't want to break up the family. Break up the family. As if the family wasn't already broken the moment Daniel signed that lease. I contacted a family law attorney, Diane Whitcomb, who specialized in asset division and financial infidelity cases. I brought her the bank statements, the lease, the messages, the whole 9 days of quiet, careful work. She looked at it and said something I will never forget. "Mrs. Reyes, this isn't going to be a case about feelings. This is going to be a case about facts, and the facts are entirely on your side." I also did something else. I reached out to Vanessa Cole directly, gently, without cruelty, because whatever she was, She was also a woman who'd been lied to. I sent her a short message with the marriage certificate attached, dated October 2014, 4 years before Tyler was conceived. I wrote, "I'm not your enemy. I think you deserve to know the truth about the man you've built a life with. I'm sorry you're finding out this way." She called me crying 20 minutes later. "He told me you two were separated for years. He told me his wife left him in 2013. We had both been given the same lie, wearing two different faces." When Daniel came home that Friday, I was sitting at the kitchen table with Diane's card, the printed lease agreement, the bank statements, and divorce paperwork already filed. Patricia was there too. I'd invited her, deliberately, so she could hear the truth directly, instead of through her son's version of it. "You told me I was overreacting," I said to her, sliding the lease across the table. "This lease is dated 4 years before your granddaughter Mia was even in kindergarten. Tell me again how I pushed him into this." Patricia's face changed color 3 times reading that document. Daniel just sat there, saying nothing, because there was, for once in his life, nothing to say. "You used company funds I helped manage, to pay for another woman's apartment," I said. "That's not a moral failure anymore, Daniel. That's a financial one, and I have the paper trail." The divorce was finalized in October 2025, 8 months after I found that phone behind the dryer. Because of the documented misuse of business funds, I was awarded a significantly larger share of Reyes Transit Solutions than Daniel's attorney initially offered. Enough that, combined with full physical custody of Mia and Jake, I was able to keep our home in Millbrook without financial strain. Daniel pays child support and a portion of the business's ongoing revenue, garnished directly, because after everything, I no longer trusted his word, only paperwork with his signature on it. Patricia and I don't speak much anymore. She sent one card months later that said, "I'm sorry for what I said about family. I was wrong. I appreciated it. I didn't need it." I had already stopped needing her approval to know what I was. Rachel and I are closer than ever. She tells Mia and Jake, often and loudly, "You are 100% Reyes and 100% Bennett, and that's more family than most people get." As for Vanessa, we're not friends, but we're not enemies either. We coordinate, carefully, for Tyler's sake, because that little boy didn't choose any of this, and he deserves better than being erased the way I once feared being erased myself. I think about that 6-year-old girl in the courtroom sometimes, nodding so hard at a judge who asked if she wanted a new name. I spent 30 years afraid that family was something that could be taken away from me if I wasn't careful enough, good enough, blood enough. But here's what that garage floor and that hidden phone taught me. Family was never the thing I needed to prove. It was Daniel's lie that needed proof, and in the end, the truth didn't care about blood or paperwork or who was in the front row of a photograph. It only cared about facts. And the facts, finally, set me free. If you've ever been told you're not real family, by blood or by marriage, remember this. The people who truly belong to you never need to remind you that you belong to them. And sometimes, the family you build with your own 2 hands is the only one that was ever real to begin with.